Hi, everyone. I want to introduce my cousin. She's my cousin, and she's my favorite cousin. We always talk about the fact that we should have been born sisters, not cousins, because we're closer to each other as cousins, more so than our own sisters, I have to say. So I'd like to introduce my cousin, Cristina Kim. She is the strategic investment arm for JP Morgan. She's managing director there, graduate from Yale University, one of the brightest, most thoughtful, kind people that I know. And then in addition to that, she's one of the smartest people I know. So when we started, me and Matt actually started Constellation Agency 5 years ago with Noman. Christina would constantly come to our office to give us advice in terms of how everything was supposed to be numerically, how we needed to present as a company. The fact that we never actually got investors from the beginning was a strategic decision from the managing director at JP Morgan, who advised personally in terms of how we should actually think about this as a company. So much that Matt and I have learned from Cristina, the advice that she's given us to grow Constellation all the way to this point. And so what she does now is she meets with founders all the time to decide whether she wants to be an investor for those companies under JP Morgan Chase. And so she is the strategic investment arm for JP Morgan for financial technology, and the decisions where they actually decide to make an investment or not has to do with the thoughts, the decisions of Cristina and her team. So I'm going to turn it over to Cristina, and then Matt, do you want to say something too?
I would just add that I love her, and she's also super fun, and I agree. You give amazing advice, and she can also give very good life advice. So, well-rounded advisor to the team here.
Oh my God, guys, I am so thrilled to be here today talking to you. I think we should probably just end this lunch and learn so you all have like the best, impression of me. And I'm afraid that, everything that Matt and Diana have said might not live up to. But listen, I am humbled to have been asked to be here. I am here to talk about anything that you guys want. Obviously, caveat any discussions here. It's really my personal views, not of JP Morgan. I have to say that up front. But listen, I'm delighted. Maybe what I can do, and then I can open it up to questions from you guys. I wanted to just maybe expand a little bit as to what it is that we do in the strategic investments team. Diana and Matt kind of gave you a quick sort of overview, but what we really do is, and I just want to make it clear just so that, we can frame a lot of sort of the questions and the dialogue is, this is a strategic investments part of JP Morgan. And the key there is strategic. So I would like to sort of differentiate ourselves from any other VC or financial investor where they purely invest for financial returns. Right. What my team does is we work very closely with all the different businesses across of JP Morgan to identify companies that we are currently using, whether it be cyber, infosec, data, trading platforms, etc. So these are companies that we are actually using them today, where we are clients of that platform or company, but where we think that an investment will actually give us something more than what we would have gotten just by being a client of that company. So the strategic benefits, and I can get into that a little bit more, but just wanted to kind of differentiate that because I'll be more than happy to talk about how we think about what's strategic or what's not. But listen, before we get into the questions, I also just wanted to say, as Diana said, I have seen Constellation grow from Diana's kitchen to Matt's apartment to now. I know you guys are moving into one of the coolest office space in the whole world. So I just from the sidelines haven't seen you guys grow. I am just so humbled, and I'm so proud of what you guys have accomplished. I am a huge fan of your management team, of the company overall, and really excited for everything that you guys are going through. So thank you for inviting me today here.
Thank you so much, Cristina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. So Layla, do you want to open up with questions or do you want to have Christina start talking? And just to also let you guys know, managing director is the highest level for investment banking at JP Morgan. So she actually, I know that so many of you guys want to do your own things in the future. I've talked to so many of you guys in depth, and I know there's big dreams and hopes for one day launching your own companies. And so this is the reason why I asked Christina to come forward so that you can ask any questions in terms of investments or what to do, not to do, whether to raise, whether not to raise, because these are all personal decisions. But I thought it'd be a great idea for you guys to also ask questions about the things that you might have interested you in the past that you've always wondered about.
If you want to kick us off, maybe you could just give a little bit more in-depth explanation about what your job entails and some of the stuff that you've encountered along the way. And then we can that will give us a starting point so people can get more of a feel for what you do. And
Sure.
then we can do some more specific questions later on.
Sure. So as I was saying, the way that we actually do what we do is we look at all the needs that JP Morgan has. And generally we're talking about fintech because we are a financial company, and a lot of the companies that we use or we rely on as vendors are technology companies. But the first step really for us is we look at what are the pain points within JP Morgan. Are there areas where we alone cannot build or develop the product, the technology that our clients need or that our employees need? And once we identify those areas of pain points, we figure out whether it's best to actually partner with someone, invest in someone, outsource it out completely, etc. Now, the key question there always comes down to how core is that for us, right? Because there are certain things that we're just not going to rely on vendors for. Like, we're going to try to build those internally. Those are going to be our core sort of capacities. But then there are many other things that are maybe ancillary or not so core to our business, where others can actually help us get there faster. Those are the fintech, a lot of the new innovative companies. And so the way that we always think about it is, okay, we're already using them. What could I actually get? Like, what do I want from them? And many times I'll give you an example, right? There's a company that if we're looking at a company and they're providing services that could facilitate the communication between us and our own clients. And that's a technology that is already out there. We wouldn't want to then build it, right? Like, this is a communication sort of platform. And so, we decide, okay, let's partner up with that company because number one, we can actually have a say by being an investor, by being in the cap table. We'll be there, we'll be inside the tent. We'll kind of know how the company's thinking strategically. We can bring in a lot of our own expertise in helping them help us, help our clients. Would I be able to get a board seat? Would I be able to maybe have them use the money that we give, that they're raising, in order to actually build very specific things that we want, which otherwise, just by being a client, we may not get. So those are the things that we always ask ourselves in order to decide whether we want to invest in a company or not. We're very much aligned with our own business. So the way that it works, which is really important, I'm really proud of how sort of we are structured at JP Morgan, is that Cristina might think that this company is super cool and we should definitely make an investment. But at the end of the day, we really try to figure out who internally is actually going to who internally determines that we are actually going to be using that technology across all of JP Morgan, or who's going to be internally sponsoring it to ensure that, in fact, all the traders start using that technology because it's going to be more efficient in terms of communicating with our clients. That sponsorship coming directly from the business that will be using that technology is huge, right? Because then we decide, okay, this is a company that we want to use. They're going to help us get to the level that of service that we want to provide to our clients. So let's make an investment. And that investment is coming directly from that business, the sponsor, the head sponsor, who's going to be using it. So I know, Matt, you were thinking a little bit about how do we look at these companies? Like, what do we look for? I think you guys must have heard this many times in the past, but obviously the product, right? The product has to be there no matter what. The product has to be there. The product has to be good. The product has to be scalable. You also obviously have to look at the management team, and we can definitely get into that. But there are certain things that we want the management team to have. So that's very much an important part of sort of what we're doing. And honestly, I think that for us being JP Morgan, a lot of the times we really have to help the companies who are very small get to a level where they can actually provide the services to an enterprise like us.
What are the similar traits that you see from founders that are successful, and what basically are other issues that you've encountered within founders and why they actually fail in their journey?
Yeah. Really successful CEOs think long term, have a vision, they know what's important. Obviously, valuation is important, but when you're trying to raise money, when you're at such a young stage, you want to get the money into the door. You're not going to go around for months and months trying to get a little bit more of a higher valuation, right? Like right now, you just need to get the money. You want to have a partner who's going to actually bring so much more than just the investment amount, the investment dollars. So to me, that's like a very important sort of thing. I think another trait is the balance between being a hustler and actually going out there and getting the business, but also being thoughtful enough to not be too sort of pushy to the point that, you start creating some potentially not strong relationships, right? I think that perseverance is you need that as a successful CEO, founder. You cannot take no for an answer. You need to knock on doors. You need to do that. But there's always the right way of doing it, the more thoughtful way of doing it, so that you maintain the relationships with everybody that you're talking to. So those are just kind of two things that I can think of right off the bat, but happy to kind of go into more details on any one of those things. Oh, and number 3, sorry, I should have said this, which, it totally reminds me of you guys here, but culture, like how the founders build their culture internally. Again, there is the long vision of what am I building here? Who am I bringing to the table? How much am I investing in my employees in order to create this big vision? So I think that those are probably the 3 things that I really admire from CEOs.
I have a quick, oops, sorry. Okay, that was helpful. And I guess conversely, in terms of things to watch out for, do you have any stories of investments that you made where you guys regretted it, or any horror stories where something went wrong in any of your companies?
Very, very good question, Matt. A couple of lessons learned, and we're really working hard in trying to sort of learn from our past. Obviously, in hindsight, 2020, we could have done things differently. But let me tell you one thing that we have learned, and it's not so much about management directly. Many times we, JP Morgan, get very excited about a product or company because it does exactly what we need them to do. And so we just, we are backing them, we make an investment. And it has been the case that sometimes what we love, what works exactly for us, JP Morgan, is not necessarily what others want. So here we are. We have told them exactly the specs of what they need to build, and they're so excited. They've got JP Morgan as a client, so of course it's going to be successful. Until a few years later, we find out that, wait a minute, nobody else is buying this product because it's only for JP Morgan. Or sometimes pat on the back, we were a little too ahead of the time. We kind of saw something that none of the other institutions thought that it would be great, but we're here like, oh my God, this is exactly what the market needs. And we make the investment, and then we find ourselves that they're not able to get other clients on board because some of the others are okay not innovating so fast as we are. So I've seen that as well. So that's a lot of, I think that what we're learning is just because we think something is a great idea, it doesn't necessarily make a viable business, right? Because you need to scale and you need to get all these other clients. I think another thing that we probably have learned, and this probably does go back to sort of management a little bit, is that it needs to be from the beginning. I think that we need to ensure that we are partnering up with a management team that truly wants collaboration, that wants to hear what we have to say, that understands the value that we are bringing to the table. Because if that's not there at the beginning, even if we love the product, if it's just not going to be this sort of great partnership where we're really, we don't always have to agree on everything, but there has to be that understanding that we are here to provide value, and we would like to be thought of that way. And so I think that that's also quite important.
And Christina, I have another question that might be helpful for people is, what are the reasons to actually find investors versus not finding investors? So we made a commitment not to do it, especially in the beginning stages. And there were reasons why we actually decided not to, but what are some of the reasons to, and what are some of the reasons not to, especially because a lot of millennials always hear about the fact that companies raise and they did such a great job raising, but what are some of the disadvantages and advantages of raising money?
Sure. I think, Diana, sometimes many companies don't have the luxury to even not raise, right? Like they just literally don't have money to pay the staff to keep the lights on. So I think that Constellation was in a very, good stage from the beginning, whereby, you guys were profitable from day one. I think that many companies, so let's put aside, many companies just don't even have the opportunity to say no to a capital raise. You just have to, right? I think that, let me do the pros. Obviously, getting more money, raising capital will accelerate your growth, especially with companies where you are not profitable, where you're pre-revenue, right? Like they're not. Constellation is a very, very unique case where you guys are just growing the top line and you have been profitable ever since you were founded. Like that is not the case across the market. So if you are losing money and you just need to raise, and so getting more than just beyond the sort of seed stage helps you accelerate your growth. For many companies, the cost of acquisition is so high that you cannot grow the top line without investing a lot more into the company. So obviously that will show you that you actually have to raise, because you need to invest so much in order to grow $1 at the top line. In this scenario, that was not the case, right? Constellation was growing at a pace that was manageable. And so therefore there wasn't this dire need to get investment. I think that the tough conversation that we had early on about Constellation was, what are you giving up by raising money, by bringing investors, right? And I think that was quite interesting. It was, once you, depending on who you bring to the table, you are in fact giving away some of the control of how you run the business. Once you have investors around the table, there will be, if you get financial investors, there will be a desire to maximize profits very quickly. And I know that Matt and Diana from the beginning had a vision of how they wanted to build this company, very, very specific about the type of culture they wanted, about the investment that they wanted to put back into the employees, into the staff. And many times when you have, financial investors around the table, you will be asked, right? A lot of those things. So Diana and Matt would have had to given up a lot of that control and have to explain for any expense, anything that you guys are doing, why it is that you're doing and how that really helps the profit. And so that was one thing that I think that in this case, the nature of what you guys, what here Diana and Matt were trying to do may have gone a little bit, may have been more difficult by bringing other outside investors. I think a lot of that was that. I think also it was about bringing the right party at the table, right? I think that there was always some need here at Constellation. We probably want to bring in more strategics, but based on how you have evolved, I think that Constellation was in the ecosystem, it was a little bit sort of in the middle, where partnering up with one strategic may have hindered the growth with others are in the ecosystem, right? So it was really about, and this is also an evolution where companies start in one area and then they end up kind of moving a little bit as to where you are in the whole chain of that product, of that life cycle. And so I think that, you know, looking at, well, a financial investor at that moment will really have so many demands about how we grow. We didn't want to, you know, it didn't make sense to give that control then. And then number two, bringing a strategic at that point may have made it less neutral for Constellation to be able to continue to get more business. So those were really very specific reasons, which I think that for a lot of other companies, you know, can be similar. So obviously you're giving up control, you're giving up, you know, sort of a lot of sort of the where your strategy sometimes, and you know, in this case, there wasn't a dire need to raise the money, and you guys were profitable. And I mean, look at where you guys are. You achieved all of that on your own, and so, you know, kudos to you.
Thank you for that, Cristina. I think we have some questions from other employees, if that's okay.
Of course.
So let's see. Just 1 second. Adam, do you want to ask something?
I do. Thanks for the lead in, Layla. I didn't know if you wanted me to just jump in. I was waiting. Hey, Cristina. I know we met a while back, but it's good to see you again. Thank you for taking the time. I wanted to ask you a question about like innovation and this idea of valuable tool for JP Morgan versus for like the entire market as a whole. Like that conversation that you have around what is valuable to us, but what could also be profitable in the marketplace. And I'm interested in this idea of like how you quantify that. I know cost per acquisition was a number that you had brought up previously, and it has a large part to do with the investments that companies take down the road, like how much money they have to put in to start turning a profit. But the position that you're in as a strategic investor, it's almost kind of similar to the way that we function with Lithia. It's not exactly the same, but like they are paying for a product and it's changing over time to match their needs. And then we're trying to figure out a way to, you know, make that work elsewhere in the marketplace as well, and figure out the need there. So I'm just curious, like that negotiation is so interesting to me. And at some point, you know, I'm not gonna use the right analogy, but it's like the tire has to hit the car. Like at some point you need to like break it down and like be able to quantify these sorts of ideas. So how do you guys measure like innovative technology? Like how do you determine what's worth continued investment?
Great question, Adam, and good to see you again. So there's a lot there to unpack. So let me try to kind of hit a couple of things, and I may not have gone through the full thing. I think it's tough. I think that what we are quite, so let me take it in two parts, putting aside the economics. On the strategic value perspective, when we make a strategic investment, we are very, very disciplined about putting together a strategic metric scoring. So we actually come up with what are the things that I am today trying to get from this investment, from this relationship. Okay, it could be my internal cost going down. It could be the ability for me to move from this platform to that. Like, we actually have metrics that we're able to quantify. Agree that some of them are not number oriented, but we still try to define it as detailed in a manner that we can actually every year or every quarter, we go to the investment and we say, okay, are we achieving that or not? If we are, then it is all the more important for us to continue to support that company and participate and invest. But if for whatever reason I thought I was going to get A, B, C, D strategic benefits, but year in, for whatever reason, whether it's on their side or my side, we sometimes change our minds as well, right? We thought that we wanted to go this one way, but actually a year from now, we decide that probably wasn't the right thing. So we're going to change our strategy. It happens to all of us. And so we try to be very disciplined about coming up with those. And early on, if we sort of decide, okay, you know what, it's not really what we were thinking about, the strategic value is not coming to us, then we're actually quite thoughtful about communicating that to the company and finding a way. But like, we're not probably going to continue to invest in that company, right? So that's kind of like, it's very important for any strategic investor, and if you guys ever do think about strategic investors, is you need to understand what it is that they are trying to get from you. Not just like, that conversation doesn't happen as often as you would want it to. And I think that you just have to be very thoughtful about, okay, you want to invest in me, why? What are you expecting to get out of this? Because you want to also, because you might say, wait a minute, I'm not sure that we will do all of that for you. Like, to your point, you continue to build exactly to their things, but now, is that investment, are you able to monetize that investment and actually make enough of a margin that it actually makes sense for you to do that, right? So I think that those tough conversations are important to have early on. And I think that many times for us, now we have learned that we should actually bring that up and ensure that everybody's on the same page, and ensure that we can see how the company can not only bring me all the benefits that I want, but going back to how can they be profitable and survive.
That makes so much sense. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know that was a big question, so I appreciate you trying to break that down. It was
Awesome. Okay, so Julius, you have a great question. You want to unmute?
Hey, so my question is that, like, since the COVID-19 pandemic, have you changed your criteria for investing in companies, or done anything different due to the pandemic?
We have not, actually, Julius. Fortunately, a lot of our companies actually have done very, very well through COVID. A lot of just to give you a couple of themes, right? From a markets perspective, it's a little bit kind of away from what you guys are doing, but there was a lot of volatility. So a lot of the sort of trading platforms that we are invested in actually benefited from that. We have also in our portfolio a couple of communication companies, messaging companies, also companies that actually allow us to, that have helped us work remotely and actually use those technologies. And so those have also fared quite well. And just generally from a markets perspective, a lot of the companies that we have had have kind of done well. I think so. So in that sense, we haven't really changed. Our rationale actually has not changed. Everything, the way that we've been sort of thinking about investments has not changed. I think what we have been conscious about at the beginning, we didn't know what's going to happen, Julius. So at the beginning, when the pandemic started, I think that we tried to kind of put aside all of the new investment opportunities. And what we did is go one by one for each one of our portfolio companies to see when are they running out of cash? Are they going to be able to raise? I think that was probably the one area where a lot of companies had difficulties raising money from new investors, because if you think about it, nobody was out there pitching. Nobody wanted to go into meetings, and we were just everybody, all the investors were busy trying to figure out where their portfolio companies were going to end up. So that was kind of the first few months. And I think that once you kind of prioritize, okay, I think that these are companies that are going to do well, this may need a little bit more money, then you kind of went back and started looking at sort of new raises. But we have been successful. A lot of our companies luckily were successful to have done well throughout COVID, and also were able to raise money and had very much an established sort of existing group of shareholders that were there for any capital needs that were needed to raise, as well as new investors.
Thank you. That was very insightful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have a question from Isaac.
I was going to ask, how do you vet companies from like a technical perspective to make sure their technology foundations are solid before you actually invest in them?
Oh, I love that question. Luckily, we've got thousands of experts in our organization who actually test it and use it, like actually use it, right? So as I said, if we go back to kind of, how we identify a company, it's what are my pain points, right? So we literally start from, okay, I don't have this, or we need this to make it better for our clients, for our employees. So you have an organization where the users are vetting the product. Those users, imagine JP Morgan, we've got a huge technology team that literally know inside out the needs of JP Morgan's own technology, and therefore they're sort of the best experts to look at this. So we go through, and I think that that's also what differentiates us from other investing sort of other investors who may have to outsource out those very specific niche sort of technology subject matter experts, as well as sort of the just generally subject matter experts of that very specific type of product. So in that sense, that's how we do it. So it's one of, I think it's probably one of the best advantages that we have, the fact that we literally, if I look at any product that JP Morgan needs, I have an entire team internally. We have a team who are the experts of that need for that product, right? So that's the benefit of an organization like JP Morgan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to answer.
I think we have another question from Jacob.
Yeah. Thanks, Layla. Hi, Cristina. Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us today. I guess my question is, you can maybe provide an example or something you've seen in the past where you were evaluating or assessing an investment or a partnership in a young company, a young tool software that you saw a need for, but maybe there were some red flags or non-starters that stopped you from making that investment or seeking out that partnership. What are some common threads you see along that line, maybe?
As I said, we first have to either be a client or about to be a client. So just by virtue of kind of whether they were able to deliver that pilot or not, or deliver that service, I think already we are kind of have some idea that, this is something that we're interested in, right? So it's not just a completely new company that we have not even that they have not really done a pilot with us, that we know nothing about. Like looking back, like those are probably the things that we need to stay away from, right? Because as soon as, if you're able to deliver to the standards of JP Morgan, right, either a pilot or sort of an initial product, that in itself says a lot about the viability of the company and gives us a lot of sort of comfort that this is somebody that we want to sort of invest in, or whether we want to get into a deeper relationship with. I think at the end of the day, it probably will come down to management. It probably will come down to, again, looking back, maybe viability, is it something that can be scalable? I think that some of the times I think a lot of investors tend to undermine the difficulty of creating a network effect. I think that we assume, again, going back to, well, it's a great product, I'm going to use it, you're going to use it, everybody's going to use it. But that network effect has become that much more difficult to create. And so it's not that we wouldn't make an investment, but I think that we would probably want to be a lot more thoughtful about what it really takes for a company to scale and to become commercially viable as well. So maybe those are kind of the reasons that we will sort of focus on.
Understood. Thank you so much.
I think we have one more question from Michael Donovan.
Hi, Kim. It's really been lovely hearing all of your insights today. I just wanted to know, looking from the investor's perspective, how do you measure the operational capacity and efficiency of the company?
Do you mean, Jacob, beyond sort of the margins, potential margins? How do you mean?
I would think more in terms of processes, organizational structure, those things sort of outside the margins that have a profound impact on how a company performs at the end of the day.
Okay, that's a great question. I think for a lot of young companies, they are so focused on just delivering a product that may not have thought out very well about things like HR, compliance, sort of things like that. And I feel that one of the values that we, JP Morgan, bring to the table is really helping them build out those things, which, to your point, it's not going to talk about sort of the margins, the efficiency, but if you think about it, as you are growing, those are really going to be quite important areas where you tend to not think about too much, like the legals, lawyers, or HR and compliance and things like that. I think that one of the things that we bring to the table when we do an onboarding of one of our vendors, even before we even think about an investment opportunity, is we go through sort of an onboarding phase where we just have to do some of this due diligence. And many times what we have tried to do with companies is sort of giving them the ropes or the help or the advice on how to build out those things early on. I think more and more we realize that we want to ensure that our companies have those have that protection, have that guidance within their own firms. Sometimes they tend to outsource it out, sometimes it's too late. And so I think that we think that that's quite important.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, Cristina, I think those are from the general company population. I think those are all the questions we have for you.
Well, let's
Fantastic.
see. Is there any more, guys? I mean, we don't have to go through Layla right now. I mean, if anybody has more, we want to encourage. We have another 12 minutes.
While we wait for questions, I think that while I was preparing for this, and I really didn't know what questions I was going to get at all, and I realized that everybody here is like so interested about the investing side. I really thought it was good. But one area that we didn't really touch upon, if I may kind of provide some insights on, is career evolution and progress and how to think about some of that. Looking back, I was trying to kind of come up with, if I were to give you one, my 2 cents on what is really important as you grow. And I think a lot of you guys are still very early on in your career, so you really can benefit hopefully from what I have learned. Maybe a little, not too late, but definitely I wish that somebody would have told me. These are 2 things. One is try to figure out early on what your personal brand is. You guys are all about brands, right? But you guys are working for brands of clients. Figure out what your personal brand is and work on that. Like, what do you want to be known as? What do you want everybody to think about when they think about you? And that is going to really help you kind of shape your career. And then number 2, we talk a lot about boards, right? Boards of companies. I would really encourage all of you to create your own personal board of directors. And this is just kind of like an analogy. I'm not actually saying have a board for yourself and invite them to meetings, but figure out around in your life right now, who are those 3 to 4 people, whether it could be within Constellation, it could be family members, it could be friends, it could be mentors that you have, but make an effort to actually write down those names and think of them as your board, and reach out to them and make sure that as you think about your own career, as you think about sort of life choices that you have, make sure to keep in touch with them and kind of have these, quarterly meetings, or not as a group, but like make it a habit to do that. Every successful company has an amazing board around them. You guys should think of yourselves as your own company. So think about your own brand and think about who you want around the table to provide you sort of that advice. Who do you want around the table, to be a part of your board of directors? And listen, that changes, right? As you grow, your needs will change. And so your board, your personal board, also the members that are going to change. You don't have to tell them that they have now fallen out of your board, but constantly push yourself in thinking about that. I think that that's going to be really important as you shape yourself, as you shape your career.
Hey, Christina, this is Numan. That's an amazing piece of insight. I love that. And I had one question that's somewhat related, I guess, in some ways. And this is the kind of question I ask a lot of people because it's very challenging for me. But when you're hiring people, what is your process? What's your thought process? What are some things that come to mind that stand out to you and that you really look for in anyone who's joining your team or joining the company or whatever it is?
Yeah, Naman, thank you for that question. And, we're constantly hiring. And to me, it really comes down to, I think, 3. I'm sort of just thinking here on the spot, but number 1, I need to see intellectual curiosity. Like that is crucial, especially in the business that I am in. You never know what kind of company we're going to look at tomorrow. You never know what JP Morgan needs are going to be, but you want somebody who just naturally wants to learn more, wants to learn about different things. And that really comes across in interviews, right? It's not somebody who just executes on things, but somebody who's just excited to learn more and who's just curious about new things. So to me, that's very important. Number 2, we're still somewhat small of a team. I know you guys are much larger, but to me, it's always about who's going to roll up their sleeves. I don't care what level you are, but I expect everyone, including myself, like you roll up your sleeves whenever. Nothing is beyond me, right? Like that person, I will do whatever it takes to make not just myself successful, but the team successful. And I want somebody just like that. And then number 3, I think this is a little bit difficult, but you do need a fit, right? You do need a fit with that team. And the organization, I think that there is sort of a JP Morgan culture, which I'm super proud of. But then if you go down a couple of levels below, like each team also has somewhat their own culture. And I think that you obviously want to constantly bring in fresh perspectives, sort of you want a diverse team, but you also want a team that sort of blends itself together well and that can work well. And I think that sometimes, it's the more difficult part to sort of assess, but I'm sure we have all seen that one individual can affect either positively the entire team or negatively. And so you just want to be kind of thoughtful about that too.
Awesome, that's great.
Cristina, I have one question, and I think this is a good question for everybody. Just knowing Cristina, she actually graduated from Yale and stayed with the same job. How many years, Cristina?
Too long.
It was over how many years?
Definitely, it's over 15 years.
15 years. And so a lot of millennials, they do jump from job to job, but from your perspective, and of course, everybody has different perspectives. Twee has been with the same job for 13 years. Noman's been with his same job at RGA for 12 years. But there's certain people that stay with the same career for a very long time and ones that actually jump. What are the advantages and disadvantages of what you see out there?
Um, listen, I think, and I see sort of a lot of folks within my team who go and pursue different things as well. I think that first of all, you need to figure out what it is that you're trying to get, right? Like, hopefully you're not leaving because there's some, you need to figure out where you're going. And I think that many folks assume that in order to progress and evolve, you need to go somewhere else. And that's, I think, too much of a narrow-minded kind of perspective. For example, I've been with the firm for over 15 years, as I said. But let me tell you, I worked in Hong Kong for JP Morgan. I worked in London for JP Morgan, and now in New York for JP Morgan. I have gone from being an associate now to a managing director. I have evolved and grown so much by those experiences that have happened in one team. But let me tell you, it's not like these were just given to me. I sought new opportunities within the team. And new opportunities does not necessarily mean going to another country, right? It means, what have I perfected? What should be my next level? And many times people just assume that you cannot get to that next level. You cannot get those new experiences within the company that you're in. And I think that sometimes is just not the right attitude, right? I think that you should always try to figure out, because to me, the goodwill that I have built in JP Morgan is just amazing. I have literally grown up with, you know, the folks that are at the most senior levels today. I started working with them when I was an analyst, an associate, right? And so to be able to have created those long-lasting relationships, it's really, really important. Having said that, this is one of my directs recently. She left for another job completely different. And her thing was, I don't know what I actually want to be. I don't know if I want to be an investor. And the only way I can find that out is by trying something else. So I absolutely think that, you know, there are many reasons to go and explore new opportunities, but also think about the goodwill that you create, the relationships, the long-lasting relationships that, for example, you're creating here at Constellation. And don't think that you have overgrown sort of your experience by just thinking about what you're doing that today, right? Like, think about what more can you be doing here. Maybe the answer at some point is, well, there's nothing more I can do, but I don't believe that. I think that as much as you grow, you can actually help your own company grow. And so I would recommend, listen, like, you always have to follow your heart and you have to figure out, you know, what is best for you, but don't assume that the next level, the next thing is not necessarily, you cannot necessarily find it within your current employer.
And then just to piggyback on that, Christina, is there red flags that you see on resumes in terms of job length time as well?
Yes.
Okay, so can you describe that?
Absolutely.
Millennials, because there are red flags for me too when I actually see a resume, but I'd love to hear from your perspective what those red flags might be.
Absolutely. And in fact, but here's the thing. If you see somebody who has only stayed about a year in each job, it really kind of, you know, you would think twice, because think about it, every time, and you guys all know this, whenever there's a new person coming into your team, you're spending so much effort and time and resources in training somebody. What you don't want is for that person to leave within the first year, right? So definitely, I think that is a red flag. Having said that, I always try to figure out why they made those changes, why they left. And that story says a lot. I think that you cannot generalize it. I think that for folks, there have been other outside sort of factors that have made them make those decisions to leave a job, right? It could be any sort of thing. So I always do try to get deep there and try to figure out the story behind it.